Hi, good morning everyone. I feel like it's probably possible for people to see my videos and think, man, this person is just really negative and all about saying no to a bunch of things. And really, that's not even what I'm about. The reason why I'm sharing videos that seem so countercultural or because we know what everybody else thinks, which is why it's common, it's like normalcy, whatever I'm usually talking against. But I feel like as followers of Christ, the Holy Spirit enables us to be able to think a little more deeply on things. And this morning I woke up really thinking about my childhood, how when I was growing up, a lot of the Disney movies, the original Disney movies, were coming out, and I had the whole collection in video cassette, and specifically, I want to talk about Snow White today. I mean, to me, I'm much older, and yet I'm still wondering if movies like Snow White had an impact on my perspective as an adult now. And it's even more important for me to dive into this because I have children, and I now am responsible, for what I'm going to expose my children to. Anytime you show them a movie, the children at the end of that movie, they will have learned and put in information into their little minds. So something that I've noticed, first of all, is that I like to put Disney movies for my kids. For example, like Cinderella. We watched Frozen the other day. There have been several times where I have rented certain movies, even Toy Story Part 3, which costs a lot of money to buy. But the children are so afraid of it that I'll pretty much waste my money because they don't want to watch it again. And perhaps that will change as they're a little older. My kids right now are 4 and 5 years old. But it still doesn't change the fact that there are some elements that are really scary for little minds, little innocent minds. And so going back to what I was saying, how did this impact me as a girl and now the person that I am? Well, I was remembering how when I was a young girl, a little older than my own kids, I can remember having a lot of nightmares. It was a constant thing where my mom would have to come to my room and console me because they were really strong emotions. And the usual dream that I would deal with is a dream of one of my family members dying, or even sometimes I would dream that that I had died in that dream. And I can remember having really awful dreams like that. I don't know if you as a parent, or maybe not even as a parent, but have you ever had a dream as an adult where something terrible happens to your children, and you as an adult, you wake up and you realize it's just a dream, but it doesn't take away the fact that that dream like really had a toll on your feelings, you know. And you can tell your brain, you know, the reality all you want, but your heart is gonna like still be affected by those feelings. So like now as an adult, I was like wondering, I wonder what like led up to that, because it was like a out of nowhere these dreams started happening. And children, for the most part, unless there was like this family trauma where someone did die in the family, like children don't usually think about those things. I'm sure there were situations, family friends that perhaps, yeah, they do cause, they might have caused me to think about this. But I was thinking, the movies that I used to watch, the Disney movies, they have a lot of death in them, don't they? So that's what I want to discuss today. But before I go there, I want to talk about the reasons why I want to like Disney movies, you know? Why I watched them as a child, even though even my little, at the time, my younger sibling, there were a lot of parts of those Disney movies that she also like, she would leave the room, she didn't want to watch them, they were scary. And I remember as just a little older than her, just thinking, okay, you just gotta be brave, you just gotta watch it even though you're scared. I don't remember every part of Snow White, but I do remember some parts. The things that I really liked about Snow White, for example, and all Disney movies, is how well made they are. I mean, growing up, those were probably the best looking cartoons that were available to me. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Reading Rainbow. I don't remember there being a lot of like, I mean, maybe Looney Tunes, Animaniacs, but like the best quality movies to watch were Disney, definitely. So they were enjoyable to watch. Another element was the music. The music, they were just beautiful, like melodies that you want to sing along to. The music is beautiful. The voices, there were funny elements to the movie. And I really just, I wanted to see a movie that was for kids, you know? And that's kind of what drives the desire to watch these movies as an adult now with my children. That I want to be able to sit down and watch this really nice quality made movie with fun songs that we can sing to, and just be entertained for a little while. More than anything, just be able to have like family time watching something together. And I feel that that's where like we have to dive a little deeper than that. Besides the whole fear element, I feel like the writers of these movies, I personally feel like you don't have to take it so far, like to create these scary characters. Even like their facial expressions, their voice, the climactic scenes. I mean, they really strive to create this like fear in children, and at the end there's this like conflict resolution, right? Usually where good conquered evil. At least that's what perhaps they is like what they will have us believe. But what's really going on is, I feel, is that throughout the movie, you're just getting a lot of fear, and you're actually learning a worldview that is secular and that is teaching you how to deal with good and evil, or with life situations without God. I could see this very clearly with Cinderella as well. When Cinderella is at her lowest point in life, and she's just crying, and who comes to her rescue? A fairy godmother. Not Cinderella cries and prays to God. So there's this element of magic in these movies where it seems to sell this worldview about it's okay for children to believe in magic, you know, which kind of goes with the whole Santa Claus thing too, where it's like we're told as parents it's good for our children to believe in magic. It's good for our children to believe like in fairies, and that magic happens, that a fairy godmother came and helped, you know, give Cinderella her beautiful dress and allowed her to, you know, dance the night away with the prince. And so my point is, these movies are not teaching children about how to deal with difficult issues in life. For example, dealing with death, all of those difficult things that are introduced to children. But it doesn't teach you how to cope with all of these difficult things with God. So by default, you're although you're not explicitly teaching against God, you are creating this normalcy in children's minds that this is how you deal with things. Looking back at Snow White, it's really dark, and witchcraft is a very real thing in our world. And I'm not sure that childhood is the time to introduce children to the reality of witchcraft. That's when children's minds are the most vulnerable, and perhaps it would be the time to introduce it if you would want them to be open to doing it later on in their life. What is she, the queen in Snow White? It's what she does. She goes into this, I don't remember what it is, like a den or something, and she has a bunch of things that she can choose, and she has this book where she is going to create a spell. She is going to create something that will harm Snow White, because if that's not dark enough, the whole movie starts with there's this queen that is jealous of this beautiful young girl. Vanity, right? Because she wants to be the most beautiful woman. Like, if that's the best quality a woman could have in the first place, right? I'm not even going to talk about like women, how they're stereotyped, and how like the roles that they play, like the cleaning up and all of that, like, because people that are non-Christians have already like even noticed those things and have discussed it. But what I want to focus on is the spiritual element. So this queen wants to murder Snow White, and she sends a man to do it. He can't, so he tells her to run away. That scene is so scary. It's like she's running in this forest, and she's just so frightened by everything. Like, her imagination goes crazy, and it's scary. It's a scary scene for any child. So the woman thinks that the queen thinks that she's dead because the man brings back a heart of a, I don't know what. He brings back a heart to her, which is really like, sounds like a horror story, which these probably were in their original form. These stories. And so when there's this mirror that talks to her, again, like this magical thing, but notice they don't make that mirror person like anything like cute. Like for example in Sleeping Beauty, they make like the fairies cute, right? But this mirror is like really scary. And he informs her of the truth that she's still alive. So she goes and she does this spell. She creates this fruit, which it kind of plays on Adam and Eve, how there was a fruit that caused death. So anyway, like getting to the point that I want to make, Snow White ends up being deceived kind of like by this serpent type of character, right? This queen turns into this ugly, scary looking older woman. And Snow White, in her innocence, I guess she eats it. And she goes into like this sleep or this death. I'm not too sure what it was exactly now as an adult. She's in this like coffin type of thing, if I remember correctly. And who can break the spell? A handsome prince, which I guess she had already kind of met in the beginning of the story. And so he kisses her and she wakes up and everything's happy again. I don't remember what happened to the queen. Maybe it was, I don't remember. I don't remember, to be honest with you. But I remember like Sleeping Beauty. Yeah, like there's this, the evil character turns into like this dragon, and and it's slayed. So although it seems like there is some good, like good is conquering evil in the movies, I would say that there's more evil in the movies that is being like showcased, and there's not any real good that is being taught, because I would argue that if you really want to paint a picture of good conquering evil, you would have to depict the ultimate good conquering evil, which is God conquering sin, conquering the enemy, the serpent, right? And again, there's no mention of God in these movies. So we have this very real concept of death, in, for example, this movie in particular. And children are kind of just left with the concept of death. And that's pretty much it. Because although magic is make-believe, and we all can know and understand, even as children perhaps not so much, but as they get older they realize magic, like the innocent magic that you want to portray in a lot of these Disney movies. It's make-believe, but death isn't a make-believe concept, and that is something that children are left with a real concept, and like no real comfort for it. There's no amount of magic, positive thinking that can comfort you about the reality of humanity's mortality. So I feel like even though I didn't really realize what these movies were that I would watch a lot, I feel like their effect was that they made me so overly aware of mortality and how sad it would feel to lose a close one or even one's own life. In the Bible, there is a completely different tone to death that is not found in Disney movies. And before I go there, I wanted to bring up how I know there's it's been put out there that the creator of Disney movies, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I had heard, that he lost a parent, I think. So he wanted to create movies where the characters had lost like a parent. But if you notice, most of the parents, for example, in the movie Frozen, they lost their parents. Or The Lion King, Simba lost his dad. Snow White, I think it was her stepmother, I don't remember, but Cinderella for sure, like she loses her dad, and I don't know about her mother when that had happened. So there are these movies of like pretty much these orphans, or these people with step parents, which also doesn't paint such a very nice picture of step parents, right? But not just that, it in a child's life, usually, I know there's situations where unfortunately children don't grow up with their parents or are in different situations, foster care, etc. But for many children, that's not the case, and they grow up with parents, which is the design that God created. He put us in families. We are born from a father and from a mother, and I think God really wants a father figure, in particular, to help us to better understand the relationship that God, our Father, has with us. So, like, growing up, we can see, hopefully, unfortunately, because of sin, that relationship might be affected. But what the design is supposed to reflect is a father here on earth that protects us, that works hard to provide for us, that loves us, that teaches us, helps us. Even our mothers. We can go to our mothers in difficult situations. Mothers, I feel like fathers exude strength in their own way. And mothers, like are so relatable, I feel like, emotionally. Like, we know our mothers can really understand our feelings, and so in difficult situations in life as children, I was always able to go to my mother. For example, in those dreams, my mother comforted me. Snow White, she didn't have a parent to run to. She had to deal with life on her own. She had to depend on a man she had to depend on a romance to save her and to make her life better. I feel like by eliminating parents in these movies, you are eliminating a very important concept that God teaches in the Bible to children, which is children obey your parents, submit to your parents. There's this role, parental role, that is supposed to be taught to children, where you're supposed to obey your parents. They're the ones that are going to guide you in these years before you become an adult, and you are not doing life on your own, trying to figure things out on your own, which is what the teenage years might feel like this, like you want to become independent from your parents, and you want to solve your own problems, and you want to make your own decisions, which if you will just wait some years down your life, you will realize that at your young age, you were not in a situation where you were like mentally mature enough to think ahead and to make the best choices for yourself. Now I look back and I'm like so thankful for my parents, in some situations where they were more wise about some things, where like I could have dealt with consequences for poor choices if I would have just tried to do things on my own without my parents' guidance and their authority in my life. So again, these movies are not really teaching children to be obedient to their parents either, and to develop a relationship with their parents where they can go to them for help. Instead, they rely on things like magic to help them solve their problems. And to me, it's just kind of eerie that it introduces this concept of magic when there's actually like people that do practice things that perhaps kind of would fall in that category, which is like spells and things like that are even more clear in Snow White, right? Maybe they've become watered down as Disney has created new movies. But there is an element of death, even like I guess one of my favorite movies that Disney has made I feel it's not so dark, would be Toy Story, because it almost seems like it's more like realistic with a human playing with toys, and yeah, like the toys come alive would be the imagination element of it, right? But even in that Sid character, the bad kid that like destroys his toys and things like that, he has this shirt that has this like skull and these bones, which is like a clear sign for like death. So even if it's like in a subtle way, there are still these elements that are really scary. And in part 3, I don't blame my kids, because it is really scary for a child to see that these toys are about to fall into this fire. And again, the concept, they're about to die, which is a really scary thing for a child to have to wrap their mind around, let alone if life, if they deal with that in their real life. It's hard enough to deal with that, let alone like them not even having to deal with that, but you introducing that to them in movies, or just reinforcing the idea of death. So I want to read this, which I want to just set a different tone for death, which we find in the Bible, which I feel we don't find in Disney movies. In John 14, Jesus says this: "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going." Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. So, Jesus explains that he is the way, he is the truth, he is the life. There's this hope in Jesus that we have, like a real hope, and something that can help us to cope with the reality of mortality. And that is something that children need to know. I remember being comforted as a child when I had those dreams, with just like, oh, but that's not going to happen for a long time. You know, and that would temporarily ease the sting of those dreams. But I feel like even better than like, because, you know, as time goes on, that you realize that, well, not everyone has a long life on earth. And you also realize that, like, the closer, like, the more you live, you know, it's like that's not so comforting anymore. But the thing that Jesus tells us is that he is the life. So he has prepared a place for us, and that he's coming back for us. And when we consider Jesus as the source of eternal life, we can feel at ease, because on Disney movies, it only talks about like the temporary life here on earth. There's no mention of like a fuller life, which is like an eternity, right? So when you think about life just here, it's really scary. But when you think life as the broader thing that it is, that God teaches us, it's a whole eternity. It's the life that we have here is just a tiny glimpse of compared to what God is preparing for us long term. And when we think about how God provides his grace for so many other things in our life, we can also find comfort in knowing that when the time comes for everyone, there will be a special grace that God gives to each person to be able to go through that situation. We can trust that he will help us make that transition in a way that isn't scary, but that, you know, his grace will help us to deal with that. I've heard people say that when you're anxious about something that is probably going to happen, or something about tomorrow, you don't have the grace yet that God will provide on that day or when that situation comes. And it's true. Look back to a very difficult situation in your life that you've gone through, and you realize like there was this grace. I was able to do it, contrary to when I was worrying that I wasn't going to be able to handle it. So in the same way, we can think about life and death in that way. And even Paul, you know, the knowledge of the gospel and just him like really understanding God's word, he was able to reach a place in his life where he had peace about death. And to him, he was even just thinking about it, like, I don't know which would be better. For me to be alive here, it would be a good thing for you guys, but it would be like probably even better for me if I went with the Lord. And I do believe that if we can study the word more and really like be filled with like God, Jesus' light and his truth, and be mindful that he is the way, I think that is the only like real way to deal with that difficult concept of death and mortality. So as you can see, like, this is completely different from what we hear in Disney movies. If you want to continue to watch these movies, I would say that there might be a way to do it. You could go to, you could watch the movie with your children, pause the movies in scary parts, or fast forward if it's too scary. Or if they don't want to watch it, respect that they don't want to watch it too, because that teaches them that they're in control of what they watch, which is a good thing to learn as an adult. But if they do want to watch it, pause and talk about, talk about these things, like what was wrong about what this queen was thinking, why was it wrong? And then talk about jealousy, talk about vanity, talk about a woman's worth, why a woman is more valuable than just her appearances. Pause it when the prince comes into the picture, and how should you deal with like relationships? Is it enough to just hear a man sing one time? Pause it when he kisses her. Is it okay for a guy to kiss someone like when they don't even know each other? I guess, like, if you think about it, you'll be pausing a lot throughout this movie. So I'm not sure. I mean, if something bad could turn into something good, I'm not sure that you need to watch the movie to talk about those things in the first place. But I feel like if you're gonna watch it, you should like address these things and talk about, like, in a situation like this, Snow White didn't have her parents, but if you ever felt this way, you have mom and dad you can always come to, and we can always talk about anything that you want. If you're ever scared, like, come to mom and dad, and we'll help you, we'll comfort you, we'll pray for you. Like in the Cinderella part, I paused when the fairy comes in. I'm like, Cinderella, she could have prayed to God. I'm like, there's no fairy godmothers, but we do have God that we can pray to. So yeah, I guess you kind of get the picture. Definitely deal with the mortality issue that is brought up time after time in these movies. Use the Bible to comfort their little hearts. If nothing else, if you don't really think that there's anything wrong with these movies, despite everything I said, consider that, put yourself, play the devil's advocate for a second. If you were the enemy, right? If you were Satan, and you really didn't want people to hear about Jesus, would you just be blatant about your agenda and make a movie that is completely against God? Or would you water it down and create this worldview where God isn't necessary? You can solve your own problems without God. Life can be happy with a romance. You don't ever have to pray. Spells are something that bad people do, but that it's normal for people to do that. I was thinking about, for example, Christmas time, where also there's this idea that Christmas is about Jesus, and that it's a time where we can really focus in on God sending his son Jesus Christ, and we take advantage of this holiday to preach the gospel. But just like, for example, there's like this twist to these Disney movies, right? That they send a message, right? Indirectly. Also, like for example, elements of Christmas, Santa Claus, another magical personality out there. Playing the devil's advocate, wouldn't it make sense that if you can't stop Christmas, because the enemy does not want people to hear about God sending Jesus' son. So if he can't stop people from doing this, then he can distract people from the message. With things like Santa Claus, presents, decorations, cooking even, just keeping people so busy, traditions, family time, things that are good. But if you leave out Jesus from Christmas, then I feel like the enemy would be effective in that situation, because although he didn't cancel the message of Jesus, he was able to distract you in such a way that you didn't really hear it as a society, or as even in your private celebration at home. And also, I'm not too big on pagan origins on Christmas, because although it makes sense on Halloween for me, being Halloween is considered a satanic holiday. In the same token that it's accepted as a satanic holiday, those same people consider Christmas as a holiday about Jesus. So it makes sense that if the enemy can't stop Christmas also with just distraction, it makes sense that he would distort Christmas and try to compare it to Halloween, and make it into something that is pagan-like and that no one should celebrate it. Because if he can convince Christians or non-Christians, atheists, that Christmas is nothing more than something pagan, and that no one should celebrate it, then you just got a bunch of people to stop spreading the message of Jesus Christ. Even if it is on that day, he would have been effective. So it's the same way. It's kind of like the enemy, like even in the garden, right? The serpent wasn't blatantly obvious of what he was trying to do, which also goes with the theme of death. See, it seems that the enemy has always had this agenda of death, and he's subtle about it. So we can recognize that he's subtle in his tactics, and that we need to be wise in everything that we do, in the things that we show our children, even in how we celebrate Christmas, in our life. Don't be so busy, make time for Jesus, so I hope this offers a different glimpse on Disney movies, and that we will be very careful to not just accept things like the world does, but that we be more critical than the rest of the world, and that we be the thinkers in our society, and that we speak up when we see something that's not right.